Good evening, folks, family, friends, loved ones, enemies, frenemies, wizards, witches, muggles, mudbloods, people of Middle Earth, to another episode of Disguise Coverage, part of the Cover One Sports Network and the only podcast in existence, I promise you, I swear to you, that gives you an equal amount of blueberries in each muffin. I'm your host, Anthony Prohaska. Find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro2_ANT. Give me a follow on the old Twitter. Feel free to give me a follow on the old TikTok as well. Same handle, pro2_ANT. In tonight's episode, on the back half of the episode, as we do here on in-season episodes of Disguise Coverage, we are going to be addressing the Bills' most recent game against the Miami Dolphins, talking about some stock up, stock down players, position groupings, schemes, trends, some structure pieces. There's, again, small sample size. We're 3 weeks in, but there are some things that need to be further discussed and diagrammed in detail when it comes out of that unfortunate loss in Miami in week 3 for the Buffalo Bills. So that'll be happening in the back end of this episode. But on the front end of this episode, the main event, not to take away from what happens towards the end of the show, which you should definitely stick around for because it's going to be fantastic. But on the front part of this show, again, the main event, what we do here, going over game-deciding matchups for the Buffalo Bills and their upcoming weekly opponent. This week, the Bills travel to Baltimore into a potential not great weather game to face the Baltimore Ravens. And with that being said, I had to bring somebody on who covers the Ravens, who knows the Ravens. So again, with that being said, and without further ado, I would like to bring on to the show Mr. Spencer Schultz. And I'm going to drop awesome label for himself, calling himself Spenny Powers. I shouted that out to you before we went live. I thought it was so great. I had to do it again. Spence, I appreciate the hell out of you for being here, joining me tonight, and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. You, all the muggles, all the blueberries and the muffins, we got it all going on, Ant. This is awesome, man. I'm happy to be here. Big Cover One guy. You guys have been killing it independently for years. Huge fan of you guys' work. You guys have been OGs in the kind of Twitter filmosphere, and happy to be here, man.
Yeah, and I'm pumped to have you. So for those who saw communication going out beforehand, we're going to have Cole Jackson on the show tonight. He unfortunately had to deal with some life things, and I was talking to Spence beforehand. I was going back and forth between him and Cole, really like mental wars with myself of figuring out who I wanted to bring onto the show. But I've known Cole for longer. We have, a really good rapport. And then he had to bail out. And I followed up with Spence. Spence, just in case people don't know, let them know what do you do, where they can find you, all that kinds of stuff. Because I first came across you from like a film perspective and just your work and how you break down the X's and O's, which I'm a huge fan of. That's what I'm about here on the show. But you do a lot. You cover a lot. Obviously, you have a focus on the Ravens, but let all the people know where they can find you and what you do and all that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me at Ravens4Dummies. That's the number 4. You can find me at BaltimoreBeatdown.com. You can find the Baltimore Beatdown podcast if you ever want to get interested into anything the Ravens are doing. We do a lot of draft coverage as well. I worked for Pro Football Focus for a little. I worked for Sports Info Solutions for a little. Been at it since about 2019. I really started to dip my toes into it and have just continued to try to find ways to unsheath the veil and the wool and all the proverbial wool over the kind of football viewers' eyes and get into the intricacies of such a simple yet complicated game that in my mind is the last form of being a gladiator, man. I mean, rugby is pretty cool too, but yes. I've just always really loved the violent aspect of the sport. I think anyone that I played football with growing up would say that that was my favorite part of it. And I really didn't, when I was growing up, I really didn't know a ton about the X's and O's. And we would run like a couple plays and we would get like a Xerox, from the school, like 4-page stapled together playbook that you couldn't even see what half the plays were because the ink was running low or something. And then, it was a mess. My high school wasn't very good, but always loved the violent part is my favorite part, man. And, they take that part away, but you still see it. The big uglies, the offensive line, defensive line, they're still going to war every single snap. And I love the sport and love talking about it.
That's an awesome way to put it. I always think it's funny it's funny. I said it to my buddy earlier today too. Like, I think football players are like the modern day gladiators for what it was like back in, the days of the Roman Coliseum and everything, which is what makes it so funny with how many rules. And I'm all for player safety. I don't want anything bad happening to anyone at any point, but it's funny or ironic or comical or satirical, whatever verbiage you want to use there, and how they're really trying to like make a game safer where the object is to get as big and as strong and as fast as you can be and put on equipment and run full speed into another guy who's
it's like jousting, the House of Targaryens going on first episode. People that watch that first episode, they're running full speed in their armor and their gear and, trying to demolish each other. It's still the same thing at its core.
And it's hard to make that safe. Like, you can try and tweak rules here and there, but in the essence of it, look, it's like trying to be a freestyle swimmer and not wanting to get wet. Like, those two things, they don't do this. They butt heads. Who else is going to butt heads? Buffalo Bills, Baltimore Ravens, week 4 in Baltimore. Spence, before we dive into some of the matchups, what's the state of the Baltimore Ravens at this point right now in your estimation? And trust me, Bills fans understand your pain on this one. An unfortunate loss to the Miami Dolphins, a loss that should not have happened. I think Baltimore should be sitting there at 3-0. But they come back, have a solid victory in New England this past weekend. What's your state of this Ravens team heading into Buffalo? As some guys, J.K. Dobbins starts to come back. You start to see, more, a little bit of stability in some areas on this team. What's the state of the Ravens as they face Buffalo this week?
I think that the Ravens, and to, I guess, go kind of meta, is that they wanted, the fan base wanted, everyone wanted so badly to be over all of the injuries that took place. 2021 was supposed to be a huge season for them. They had made a lot of moves. They had solidified positions. Ronnie Stanley was supposed to come back after a really significant injury. All these things are supposed to happen. The Ravens offensive coordinator, Greg Roman, Bills fans very familiar with, obviously.
Yep.
And Greg Roman spoke last year, hey, we really want to install an under center offense and diversify this attack. And he said that in June. Lo and behold, Lamar Jackson ends up missing the first 10 days of training camp. They draft Rashad Bateman. He ends up with a hernia, misses all of training camp. Marquise Brown misses most of training camp. Sammy Watkins, Bills fans also familiar with this and this aspect, misses most of training camp. J.K. Dobbins, tears his ACL. Gus Edwards tears his ACL. Ronnie Stanley only plays one game. Suddenly you got Alejandro Villanueva playing left tackle. That's not what you wanted. And this offense had to go. And they did. And they made strides. And Lamar Jackson mechanically, no matter what any Ravens fan wants to say, has made so much mechanical progress as a passer since he was at Louisville. And he was a good passer at Louisville. Josh Allen, same deal. Josh Allen continues to make strides and get better and better and better. But the amount of work those two particularly have put in really started to show for Lamar. He comes out against Vegas last year. His base is so much sturdier. His motion just continues to get cleaner. He's posturing up in the pocket, throwing the ball tall and over top and really delivering the ball to all aspects of the football field. And then the wheels just fall off. And fall off. And that leads into 2022. So you think, that they got guys like Stanley are hoping to get back, still hasn't played. J.K. Dobbins finally just plays. There's no Marquise Brown. Marcus Peters just plays for the first time against the Dolphins. All of these things. Marlon Humphrey missed a lot of time last year. Tyus Bowser, one of the most underrated players in the NFL, in my opinion, ends up tearing his Achilles week 18 against the Steelers and hasn't been able to play yet. They draft David Ajabo, who's still recovering from an injury. Kyle Fuller tears his ACL week 1. Juwan James tears his Achilles in week 1. So these injuries, no matter how hard or how much you want it to be like Madden and the offseason happens and the guys are just automatically healthy and they're
just turn injuries off.
Exactly. The 89 is an 89 again. And that player's the same as they were. And hey, maybe they even gained a point in their rating. They've still just been dealing with the repercussions of that. And in this Patriots game, it felt like was really the first time that it all started to come together a little bit, especially on offense, where they've had some time to gel. They've had some continuity in their offensive line to a degree in 4 of their 5 positions. Lamar Jackson feels confident in the pocket. He trusts his protection. J.K. Dobbins is back on the field. The receiver room has been relatively quiet with injuries. So this offense really starts to roll. And the defense has just been, a mixed bag of joking tricks of what are you going to do? They've been great on 3rd down. They've been horrible on 1st and 2nd down. They've been terrible in the red zone, but they lead the NFL in turnovers. So it's a real, smorgasbord or a potluck, I guess, more so of, you don't know what you're going to get defensively right this second, but you see them starting to figure things out on the defensive side of the ball a bit. The offense looks fantastic.
You touched on Lamar mechanically and as a passer. And again, before we dive into the pure matchups of Bills versus Ravens, talk a little more about that. For me personally, I get it. I get how dynamic of an athlete he is, how electric he is as a runner and what he can do with his legs. And I don't know if it's strictly because of that. I know that plays a role to some degree, but I feel like he's always been underrated as a passer. And as he's continued to improve in the NFL, I feel like he continues to get overlooked, or his passing game is either, at best, it's an afterthought, or he's knocked all the time, whether it's mechanics, whether it's ball placement. There's some people out there who think he doesn't have a strong arm, which I completely disagree with. As someone who watches him day in and day out, talk about where Lamar is from just a pure passing standpoint. If he had to live or remove his legs and just analyze him as a thrower of the football, where is he in your estimation?
He's clean, and he gained weight this offseason. And I think the biggest times we've seen Lamar Jackson struggle as a passer have coincided with prolonged periods of piss poor pass protection, to alliterate.
Yes, good call.
And last year we watched them really start to struggle in pass protection, and he was able to hold it together with duct tape and glue and popsicle sticks, and go come back against the Chiefs, come back against the Colts, be able to still deliver the ball and survive in the chaos, in the foxhole, while pressure's in his face. Then it just continues. The Bengals really start to blitz the crap out of him. A lot of people look back to that Dolphins Thursday night game, and the Dolphins did really exploit the aspect of running pressures, which the Bills are so familiar with. I'm sure everyone's been talking about that for a month in regards to the Dolphins. But the Bengals were the ones that really started that and kind of beat the doors off the Ravens in the fourth quarter of a game last year. And he just wears down. His eyes will start to drop. His base, he's on his toes. His feet are wide. His eyes are going down. He's looking for a lane to escape. And people are waiting for him. They're spies. There are contain angles and lanes and rushes and all of these things, and stunts and bringing creepers and all of these kinds of aspects, dictating protection. So he just couldn't keep taking a beating for a month straight and continue to hold his mechanics and his poise and his pocket presence together. Now they have a really good offensive line in pass protection, and Greg Roman is very willing to dedicate an extra body or two extra bodies to make it a 6-7 man protection for him. And he's as confident as possible. He is bigger, he is stronger, and his mechanics are continuing to shine. I would say the one aspect that, in my opinion, has been missing from Lamar's game for at least 2-3 years that has prevented him from reaching that upper echelon as a passer, as opposed to a Josh Allen who took that leap, as opposed to Mahomes and some of these younger guys, is pre-snap. And the Ravens run a ton of motion. A lot of it is run motion, and a lot of it is like, if it's a pass motion, it's something to make you think it's a run play, and then you only have a couple reads. Well, now Lamar isn't – the motions aren't just built into the play. Lamar is starting to be able to comprehend or have the control or both to say, okay, I don't know what I'm seeing here, so let me give myself a better look. All right, I've got, for instance, last week, the Patriots run a cover zero on them that they disguised decently well at first. And he was like looking around, and you can kind of almost see like, what am I looking at here? So he just simply flips J.K. Dobbins out of nowhere from the right to the left, and a safety just follows him. And suddenly there's a linebacker and a safety stacked up. The other linebacker is just mugging. It's a cover zero. I'm going to throw it up to Mark Andrews, and he's going to go dunk. I'm not going to let the pressure get to me.
Oh, that first touch, or the second touchdown, I believe, right? He just throws it right up to him in the middle of the end zone, and Andrews kind of like mosses the safety a little bit, brings it right down.
Yeah, and it wasn't, some fantastic throw, but it's a good throw in theory. Hey, my 6'5", 250-pound tight end that is an incredible player can just go dunk on someone, and I don't need to perfectly place this ball. I know he's one-on-one. And if the guy makes a play, but I'm not going to let the pressure get to me. So it feels like for the first time in his NFL career, he is capable of seeing into the matrix pre-snap and saying, where do I need to figure something out defensively? How do I solve the problem I'm having pre-snap with a little adjustment, with a little motion? What can I check into? And I don't think Greg Roman really gave him 1A, 1B, both, I don't know, the answers or the ability to until this year. And part of that is missing training camp and COVID and young receivers and broken offensive lines. But now it feels like the offensive line's in a good place. The receivers have been around for a little while. It's not all these green rookies necessarily. And he's got the answers. So that makes this offense unbelievably dangerous to me.
Yes, I echo a lot of those sentiments. And not to kind of hammer home on the low-hanging fruit, but the injury piece last year, I get so frustrated with people who I thought it was well known amongst everyone, but you'll get so many people who, well, I mean, yeah, their defense was terrible last year, their offense was terrible last year. And I'm like, do you know how injured they were almost everywhere? I think that they had the most man games lost due to injury, I think, in NFL history.
Them and the Titans both had really historic injury riddled years last year.
Just unbelievable. And not only was it like in terms of quantity, but at key positions, you're losing your top 2 running backs for a run heavy team. You lose multiple pieces, first and second stringers on the offensive line. Lamar goes down. Rashad Bateman, like you mentioned, is supposed to be that guy. He goes down. Peters goes down. Humphrey goes down. You have so many players that just keep falling off and going by the wayside. And that's why I thought so much of last year was there was too many variables. And with people talking like, oh, what were the Ravens going to be this year? I saw a lot of people pointing to who they were last year. And I saw, no, like crumple that paper up and throw it out, because who that team was, it's not irrelevant to who they are now. But there were so many variables from last season, and seeing who they can be, like you mentioned, I think offensively and defensively, they have a lot of chess pieces and schematic components that make them a dangerous team holistically. They were, I think the Bills are up there. The Chiefs are up there. I know everybody was loving the Chargers coming into the year. The Baltimore Ravens have been a team that have been on my radar nonstop this entire offseason, especially after they had a really strong draft class coupled with everybody coming through healthy. So I'm very interested to see, who this team is going forward and who they are in week 4 as we now transition to the crux of this episode, the game-deciding matchups, Buffalo Bills versus Baltimore Ravens, as we do here on the show. For those who are new or who don't know, any thoughts, questions, comments, concerns you have, matchups, players, notes, whatever, throw it up into the chat. I will pull them up as we go throughout this. And the form which we're going to go, Spenny and I are going to go back and forth on our game-deciding matchups, going from 3 to 2 to 1. So our third most important, second, and then top-notch. It could be as large scale as possible. It could be as granular as possible. It could be schematic. It could be 1 player, 2 players. It could be film-based. It could be analytics and metrics-based. It could be anything. Roy gets it. I do say holistically a lot. I love that word. I just think it's
mine's absolutely. Absolutely.
Nice.
I just always default to that one.
And the way you say it too, it evokes a lot of confidence. Like you saying absolutely gave me confidence. Like if you said that to something I said, I'd be like, yeah, I feel good about what I said. The way he said absolutely, it just feels good. You're also getting a Matthew Stafford comp in the chat, which I could see.
It's funny because I have a buddy that is spot on, dead like Matthew Stafford. Looks so similar to him.
Yeah, very funny. You're getting that Stafford comp. We're going to go back and forth. Cole looks like Mark Andrews. You look like Matthew Stafford. It's a dynamic combination and comparison grouping Ravens content and Ravens analysts have. But we're going to dive into it now. Oh, I got to stop real quick. We have a rule. Whenever we get a super chat, we got to stop, bring it up, everything. You get it. Thumbs up. Mad Hatter Pro, Tim P. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for your super chat. He says, I'm unfortunately at work tonight. Was looking forward to this. Wanted to show my appreciation. I'll watch it later. That's awesome. I sincerely appreciate you reaching out and let me know, why you have to stab me in the back and value your job over this show.
What are we doing?
Working. Like that matters in life for anything. But no, I appreciate you even stopping in, going back to watch it later. And thank you very much for the super chat. Really appreciate it. Andrew, you also get it. We're getting sidetracked from good vibes and Matthew Stafford comps. Andrew comes in and says, smash the like. Yes, smash the like. Likes going a long way towards helping us to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears. They are the lifeblood of the algorithm here on YouTube. But I digress. Spence, we're going to go into it. No more Mark Andrew comps, no more Matthew Stafford comps, unless someone new comes in later and says that you look like Matthew Stafford, in which that case we might acknowledge it. Who knows? The world's a funny place. We're going to start with our number 3 matchup each. You are the guest. You are going to go first. I pass the mic to you. The floor is yours. What is your third most important matchup for the Buffalo Bills and Baltimore Ravens come week 4?
I mean, it's the easiest one I'm going to go with. I'm going to take the low-hanging fruit here, so to speak. And I'm just going to go with the Bills pass rush against the Ravens offensive line in general.
Okay.
Specifically, the Ravens are down to left tackle 4. And left tackle 4 for them is someone that was a historic draft crush of mine. Absolutely in love with the prospect.
And a fantastic name.
A fantastic name. It is the big kangaroo himself, Daniel Fa'alele, the flying Australian. He was someone that was so enticing to me in the draft process, specifically in the Ravens scheme and the Patriots scheme. maybe the Josh McDaniels scheme a little bit more so, but he's 6'9", he's 380 pounds, and he's not a inefficient mover. He has good balance, these kinds of things, but hasn't played a ton of football. Goes to IMG Academy, one of the powerhouses of, producing top tier college level athletes, NFL level athletes. Gets some work in, goes to Minnesota, gets some starting experience at right tackle, and you just watch him grow. And he goes to the Senior Bowl and you watch him grow. However, he has never played left tackle before, never in any sort of organized football. He has not played on the left side. And I don't think the Ravens' plan going into the season was, hey, Daniel Fa'alele is going to go play left tackle. Juwan James, I mentioned, done for the year. Patrick McCary, who is a unicorn of an offensive lineman, can truly play 1 through 5 along the offensive line, can play center, can play right tackle, can play left tackle. One of the most underrated kind of really cool players in the NFL. He sprains his ankle last week. So Ronnie Stanley's still not back. He just had his first full participation day of practice. Daniel Fa'alele had to go in last week. Lets up 2 sacks in the first half in the first 2 drives that he's playing. Was kind of struggling to get depth in his vertical set to really force someone to try to go through him or inside of him, and just was kind of failing to get deep enough simply, and wasn't really, kick sliding off the line with a ton of explosion, just trying to keep his feet quiet so he doesn't lose his balance and get embarrassed, which is fine. And the rest of the Ravens offensive line picked it up a little bit. Ben Powers has been really solid. Tyler Linderbaum's been awesome. Week by week, you see him grow like one of those little sponges you used to throw in water when you were little that turns into this, giant, massive, fun little toy. Kevin Zeitler is a consummate professional. Morgan Moses is a consummate professional. So you weren't having any other issues. Fa'alele starts to figure it out. Now, there's no Von Miller, and I would even contend to say there's really no Greg Rousseau right now on the Patriots pass rush. Boogie Basham's look good. Another humongous draft crush of mine. And I will always contend that, and I'm not talking about Basham. Basham was fine, but AJ Epinesa was a dude for me.
Okay.
He was a dude for me. Absolutely loved him. I will preach until the day that I die. He should be used a little bit more as like a 4-eye 3 tech than he should be a standing outside linebacker that lost a lot of weight.
Yeah, they made him really cut weight and then just go like pure speed rusher off the edge type.
It was kind of, asking him to do something that wasn't his strength, but has started to look all right. Started to be a pretty serviceable, decent rotational guy. So we're talking, what did I just say? Rousseau. We're talking Von Miller. We're talking, they're deep. The Bills are obviously very, very, very deep at outside linebacker. So now, are you going to go stick Fa'alele over at left tackle and ask him to go be in, on an island against Von Miller potentially, who's playing on the right side, aka over left tackle, more than he usually does? Has, I think, been there about 59 snaps this year, which is more than on the other side. Last time I looked at his kind of detailed snaps.
Very fair.
Not a fun idea for Baltimore. So then what are you going to do? Greg Roman's going to probably want to split block a tight end, come across the formation, and chip him, and be using everything in the kitchen sink to make sure that Von Miller is not just teeing off, and guys like Greg Rousseau are not just teeing off on someone that, is kind of learning how to wipe their butt with the other hand still in playing left tackle. So that is a matchup that I think is fun, but very dangerous for the Ravens, and is going to require a little bit of elbow grease and ingenuity, some MacGyverness, if you will, for Greg Roman to limit.
I like that point in going to the film for this past week for Ravens Patriots. Yeah, that left side for me, and I like Fa'alele too, not just because of the name, although it is very fun to say. Yeah, you just saw him kind of giving up a soft edge, getting beat around on the outside. And for a team like New England, that I think this is also a testament to Lamar Jackson and what he did. For a team like New England that just wants to ideally play man coverage and play single high, if you can get pressure with 4 or just 5 almost right away, you saw multiple snaps. That left side of the line was just, especially early on, like you mentioned, was very leaky. Lamar was getting flushed from the pocket more than he initially wanted to. That matchup, their offensive line versus the Bills defensive line, overall is one that I find very intriguing, especially from the interior perspective with how banged up the Buffalo Bills are. We don't know if Jordan Phillips is going to play. We don't know if Ed Oliver is going to play. We're thinking at best it's going to be Daquan Jones and Tim Settle from that normal 4-man interior rotation, and think that puts more pressure on Rousseau and Von Miller and AJ Epinesa and Basham, because your edge grouping suddenly becomes your more stabilizing factor on that defensive line. And we know the numbers and how much the Bills have generated pressure this year without having to blitz. If the Bills can continue to just rush 4 and play 7 and have the coverage numbers in coverage and be able to drop and do everything that they like to do back there, it's a huge advantage. And it plays into one of my my points later. It ties into my number 1 a little bit, so I'm going to save some thoughts for that. My number 3 point, I'm still, even right now, like as I'm reading it, I keep going back and forth with my 2 and my 3 in terms of where they're going to be. I'm going to go with the other side of the ball. So you're talking Ravens offense, Bills defense, Ravens O-line. I'm going to talk Bills O-line versus Ravens defense. Specifically, can the Buffalo Bills run the football against the Baltimore Ravens? From a large scale perspective, that's it. But we look at this Bills offense that I've said it a lot in the Cover One Film Room. I've said it on the show. And a lot of times it's been like jokingly said. But if you open up the Bills playbook, it's just a picture of Josh Allen. Like their offense is Josh Allen. He's a unicorn. Similar in different ways, but similar to how the Ravens offense was completely tailored and revamped to fit Lamar Jackson once he came in. You had this Joe Flacco-led offense. I believe Marty Mortenweg was still the offensive coordinator at that time. He gets shipped out. Roman comes in, and you just have this philosophical shift on the offense, doing something that no one is doing in the NFL, going to a gap, power scheme type of run, using Lamar as a runner, playing into that aspect, going more tight end heavy than you are anything else. Lamar's a unicorn. Josh is a unicorn as well. But, and it's not just recency bias for that game against Miami, but so much of this offense for the Bills is on Josh Allen's shoulders, whether it's with his legs by design runs, whether it's on his legs from scrambles, or just with his arm and everything that he's asked to do. 73 dropbacks against Miami, 63 passing attempts.
Makes me want to throw up.
It's unreal. And I think, there's a stat that I can't remember. Those 73 dropbacks, I think, are the most since 2012. Second on that list, including the playoffs, is Lamar Jackson against the Tennessee Titans when they lost in that playoff game, which that makes more sense. You go down early and you're down big. Your offense isn't tailored.
You're in a negative game script.
Exactly. So that makes sense. Like, well, why did they pass a ton? Well, they had to because it was the game script, so on and so forth. Not what happened with the Buffalo Bills. They were just so ineffective in running the football. And some numbers with that, not to blow it out of proportion, but if you look at the number of carries for Bills running backs in that game, Devin Singletary, 9 carries for 13 yards. His longest run of 6 yards. If you remove that, he had 8 carries for 7 yards. Zach Moss, 4 carries for 46 yards with a long of 43. Remove that run, he had 3 carries for 3 yards. The Buffalo Bills running backs, 27th in running back attempts with 49 this year. They are 22nd in yards after contact. They are 3rd in percentage of runs hit at the line of scrimmage at 51%. They are 31st in EPA per attempt by running backs at negative 0.22, and they're 22nd in broken tackle plus missed tackle percentage per attempt. They're not executing on double teams as an offensive line. Whether they're running duo, whether they're running inside zone, outside zone, you're seeing basic miscommunication pieces like a guard and a tackle working on a 3-tech. Okay, cool. Let's work this double team. One of us peels to the second level.
Somebody needs to climb. They never climb.
No, or what you got in the game against Miami, they both climbed and they leave the 3-tech who just comes into the backfield. And I think some of that is a bit understandable. Spencer Brown was hurt throughout the offseason. Ryan Bates was hurt through training camp. Mitch Morse has been banged up. Roger Saffold didn't get a ton of time in training camp. Double teams and offensive line play in general is so chemistry based. The Bills starting front does not have a lot of reps together in live game action experience. And I think it's showing early on in the year, let alone you add on all the injuries and all the inconsistency that brings that we saw in that game against Miami. And I come to the running back piece because the run game piece, because the weather looks like it might potentially force that kind of game script based on the potential kind of monsoon action we might see in Baltimore. But 2, I just think this is going to be a thing for me, not necessarily because of Baltimore, but just because of how this offense is. I do not think you can continue to put everything onto Josh Allen's shoulders and make him be Batman play after play after play, especially when your offensive line is having protection issues from a pass protection standpoint. Then you're also asking him to evade pressure and navigate the pocket and make throws. Everything that's just heaped onto his shoulders. I think it's
also
too
just
much.
tiring. And I
Yes.
think Josh said, right? Like, I was exhausted.
You see him meeting up with Tua at the end of the game, and he just almost like looked like he wanted to collapse on him. He just put his head on Tua's shoulder pads like he was done. And again, I mean, it's a gajillion degrees out. He's dropping back 73 times, not to mention all the times he's running and everything he's doing. And then with a coach, like, I know the Ravens defense has had some issues these first couple of weeks, but I do believe in Coach McDonald, and I like a lot of the pieces on the Ravens defense. I loved Odafe Owe coming out. I love Matabuke. Patrick Queen, I recognize his coverage struggles, but I love what happens when he's coming forward. I do respect what they have in the secondary. I think they're still trying to figure out how that safety rotation works, and Kyle Hamilton is still getting acclimated to life in the NFL. But if you can give any defense, let alone one that has star caliber players and a good defensive coordinator, the opportunity to just hone in on one thing because you're so siloed and you can't do this other thing and you have no pivot, it makes life so hard for Josh Allen and this Buffalo Bills offense. And like what we saw against Miami, everything was hard. It looked like they were constantly trying to squeeze blood from a stone. So I'm looking at my number 3 matchup, that Bills run game. Can they get easy yards or just give me 3 yards so Josh Allen can catch his breath for a play or two and just kind of relax, because so much is heaped upon his plate. And I want to see if they can not be one-dimensional and have that aspect against that Baltimore defense.
Most definitely. And what I'm looking at here is I've seen, I believe, 32 gap runs, man runs, power, counter, all that kind of stuff for the Bills. And it looks like 23 zone concepts, somewhere around there. I'm looking just at the players. Looks like Deion Dawkins, I assume, hasn't come off the field. No. 32 gap scheme to 23 in zone. So that tells me 2 things. And, I only trust PFF as far as I can throw them, but I really do like their blocking grades a lot, actually. I've only got to watch, I think I've watched like 3/4 of each game so far for the Bills. The gap scheme, they are still unsure. They are still a little questionable. Like you said, Spencer Brown misses time. He is the one you want to be pulling. He is the one you want to be running behind or asking to down block. So he should be a force multiplier as a freak athlete along their offensive line, but he probably doesn't feel very confident. The gap scheme with Ken Dorsey, obviously at the end of the season last year with Dayball, the gap scheme really helped out the Bills. Mm-hmm. But now Dorsey's not Dayball. He probably has some different ideas, some different terminology, a couple tweaks here and there. Haven't gotten that chance. But at the same time, zone scheme requires so much just reps. It just needs reps to be able to understand, when is this deuce block going? When am I going to climb? How much help am I going to need? The man next to me to help dig into the hip. And then when can I release? How am I going to prevent second level linebackers or second level defenders from penetrating this play? That all takes time. That's something I've watched the Ravens go through already these 3 weeks. They're using a lot more zone concepts than they typically do. It takes time. Continuity. Any offensive line coach will tell you, continuity is key. The Bills haven't quite had that yet. They haven't had enough reps trying to run the ball even in game. Practice can take you very far, but I think you're absolutely right. And I'll tell you one thing. You don't want to be running away from Justin Madubuike. You don't want to be running at Calais Campbell. So what do the Ravens do? They protect Calais Campbell on the outside with Odafe Owe or with another outside linebacker and make you line a tight end up over him, or make you try to run the ball at him. Justin Madubuike on the other side, I think, is one of the premier pursuit backside defenders against zone concepts I've really seen over the last 5 years. He's about 6'2". He's a short guy. He has 34.5-inch arms. He can keep you away from him. He's incredibly strong. He's incredibly fast. If you run away from him, if you ask a guard to reach block him, he will beat them across their face. He will go chase down your running back. He ran a 4.8 at the combine. Not dissimilar from Ed Oliver. Not a dissimilar athlete from Ed Oliver. So I think it's going to be tough. Like you mentioned, the run, the weather, that's going to be a huge element. And that's what I'm going to pick as my number 2 is the Baltimore Ravens and the Buffalo Bills against Mother Nature.
I thought of doing this. And well played.
I love a rain game. I love a wind game. I love a snow game. The last time these two teams played was in Buffalo in the divisional round in a game where Justin Tucker and Bass could not kick 40-yard field goals. I think there were 4 combined missed kicks from under 50 yards in that game.
You know it's bad when arguably the greatest kicker of all time in Justin Tucker is missing kicks. Something wonky is going on.
It was a nightmare. I think the longest completed air yard pass in that game was 19 yards. The quarterbacks couldn't. Tyler Huntley ends up coming in at the end of that game, and the ball, he's trying to put touch on deep passes, and the ball is literally, it's like me trying to golf, anytime really, if there's wind or not wind, but
anytime
in wind, and the ball's just running away from him. So the elements in this one are going to absolutely play a factor. We'll see to what degree, but it kind of just feels like in these big rain games, and if it's going to be a monsoon, somebody just has to go make a play in the pass game. Somebody needs to go make a big catch with wet hands and a wet ball, and your gloves have no, tack to them anymore. So that changes things. And the Ravens are better built to go run the ball, I think, and be able to go have their footing and be able to move the ball that way. But if they can't go catch the ball, can't go make plays, Mark Andrews, this is a fan perspective thing more so than any sort of actual analysis, has never really been a mutter, I don't think. He really seems to struggle in the rain. He's from Arizona, played in Oklahoma. Doesn't rain a lot. Don't think he catches the ball well in the rain. Rashad Bateman, a Minnesota dog. We'll see what he can do in the snow and the rain and those elements. But Stephon Diggs, I know, will go make plays in adverse weather. Josh Allen's arm can cut through the wind and the snow and the rain. So I think if this is a tropical depression, as my venerable weathermen are telling me it will be down in Baltimore, I think, can you go make a play in the pass game against Mother Nature? Stephon Diggs, Rashad Bateman, Gabe Davis, Dawson Knox, Isaiah McKenzie. Can someone go haul in a tough catch in the rain downfield and flip the field or score a touchdown? That ends up looking like a defining moment a lot of times to me in these kind of mutter games.
If we get that mutter weather, as it looks like we will, who do you think has the advantage in this game given their structures? Like, because for me, like you mentioned, I think if we get the weather that we expect to get, I think the pendulum swings in favor of the Baltimore Ravens. But like you said, all you need is somebody to go out and make a couple plays in that, in that type of atmosphere and in that type of environment, which the Bills have several playmakers who can. But if we get that weather scenario that we anticipate, do you think that pendulum swings towards the Baltimore Ravens side?
I would think at home as well. If this game is to the point where there can be any impact to force you into a silent count and allow the offensive line to get their footing or not, as if the Bills are on offense and have to use silent count at all, still in inclement weather, then that's not going to be in their advantage. They're going to have to be a little bit more reactionary off the ball as opposed to understanding the cadence and when they can snap and take their first step. The Ravens have been much better with their cadence. Like I said, pre-snap Lamar, much improved. He's been trying to call some hogs, here, piggy. He's really been trying to get after it this year. So, sweet.
I was going to do it, but I didn't want to cut you off.
Nice. There we go. He's been trying to do it. So I think at home with an offense that can run the football, is comfortable running the absolute crap out of the football, I think it does swing to the Ravens a little bit.
J.K. Dobbins within that notion. First game back last week. Looked better than I thought he would, especially after it was just a couple weeks ago where there was practice footage of him just running reps and then he's like limping out of the drill and I thought it was still maybe potentially too early for him. They worked him in with Justice Hill, who had a really good run on that stretch that he cut back and got outside McCourty and got up the sideline. Do you anticipate more work for Dobbins? Do you think... Nice. I'm sorry. I saw this comment. His mother.
I was about to pull that up too. His father was a mutter. His mother was a mutter.
His mother was a mutter. Oh, nice. Another comment that came in with his mother was a mutter. Oh, his mother was a murder. But I know what you're going for. J.K. Dobbins, someone who, when healthy, this Ravens running attack with Lamar, Dobbins, and Gus Edwards, and the combination of that offensive line, really deadly, even more so than it already is by design. But Dobbins is another piece that I really liked in the draft coming out a couple of years ago. I was high on him last year, took him in multiple fantasy leagues. Also had I had a lot of J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards shares last year. So I was just gutted in a lot of leagues.
I usually never draft. I refuse to draft until with the final week ahead of the game.
Okay.
And I was like, oh my gosh, Gus Edwards. I got him in like the 5th round. I was like, J.K.'s out for the year. Gus Edwards is going to have 1,500 all-purpose yards, 15 touchdowns.
Yep.
And then he's done.
I think he tore his ACL on a Wednesday.
was a Thursday, him and Marcus Peters within
Okay.
30 minutes of a non-contact
So
practice.
it was opening day. My main league draft was on Wednesday night, and I took Gus Edwards. The day before, I was heavy at wide receiver. I led off with Kamara, and my RB2 was Gus Edwards to go with Cooper Kupp and Terry McLaurin and all these others. I was like, oh boy, I'm feeling good. And then Gus goes down. But we digress. We get distracted easily on the show. J.K. Dobbins comes back last week. In both of our estimations, looks better than we thought he would have at this point. What kind of workload do you see for him as he comes into his second week of action? Do you think they start to ramp that up?
I would think every game is 5% more. Every game is one more series. One more of whatever it is, just a little bit more. The things that they like to do with J.K. Dobbins, and I should say the things that they trust J.K. Dobbins to do, are far and away more substantial, even just in terms of the run concept, asking him to do some more advanced things on, let's say, like a zone counter where there's no puller, things like that, trusting him to be able to read those kinds of things. The way they use him in motion, split him out wide, use him to dissect the defense, like I mentioned with things, flip him the ball in the flats, use him as a pass catcher, are far and away higher than what they trust Mike Davis, Kenyon Drake, or even Justice Hill to do at this point. So he looked great. He looked violent. He looked explosive. He looked like he had that classic. What Ravens fans always say is that it's number 27. He's 5'8" and is a meatball. And he likes to use the little kickstand where he will do something crazy, make a defender miss, and then just poke his gigantic arms into the ground and keep himself up and go get another 10 yards. So he looked like that J.K. Dobbins, like that Ray Rice, like that classic bowling ball that's explosive. That Maurice Jones-Drew, I guess, too, fits into that. So he looked great, man. Was shocked. I was not expecting that to be the case. There was no trepidation. The first touch that he had, he stiff-armed the soul out of a Patriots cornerback, put him into the dirt on the first touch he's had since 2020. The other fun tidbit here in the fan perspective is that J.K. Dobbins has never played at a Ravens home game in front of fans before. He was drafted in 2020.
That's right.
There were no fans allowed. And then 2021, he tears his ACL before he gets to play a game.
Nice
and he got pretty emotional on a local show saying, I come from Ohio State. I come from Texas, LaGrange. I'm used to the crowd. It fires me up. I was playing in the Horseshoe with 100,000 crazy Ohioans, and I haven't had that in years. And he was like, starting to get choked up about it. So I'm very fired up to see him. I'm going to be taking him as an anytime touchdown scorer. I think it's in the cards for him to get one in the end zone, regardless of what happens in this game.
Nice pull with that stat. Yeah, I completely forgot his rookie year was a COVID year, so you got nobody. Oh, very interesting piece. I like J.K. Dobbins, and I was pleasantly surprised with how he performed against New England. I think the very first snap of the game, he's in the backfield with Lamar's in gun. He gets motioned out and runs a little route, and that was the first snap. But once I saw that, I was like, okay, they're confident in J.K. Dobbins, and then he saw more workload as the game went on, still rotating him in. But yeah, I have a big question in terms of, because I think this, like you mentioned, this offense is so unique in terms of its run attack anyway, but it gets more unique when you plug in a back with J.K. Dobbins' vision.
Someone who can actually hurt you.
Yes, he's a legitimate threat when he's back there on his own, let alone paired with their scheme with Lamar and that offensive line.
I mean, they had Latavius Murray having 150-yard games last year, and Devontae Freeman, averaging 5 yards a carry.
So imagine what you get if you, no disrespect to Murray and Freeman, but when you dial up the talent a little more, especially the fit piece as well. Yeah, very key. And that's also related to my second point. I debated again. My top three, I struggled a lot in terms of figuring out where to put them. So my number two is the Buffalo Bills defense versus specifically the Baltimore Ravens rush game and their play action game. Of all the quarterbacks with at least 20% of dropbacks on the year, there are 33 of them. Lamar Jackson on play action. He's second in yards with 385. He's tied for ninth in completion percentage at 75.7%. He's tied for fourth in yards per attempt at 10.4. He's tied for second in touchdowns with 4, and he's got 0 interceptions. Baltimore Ravens on the year, 60% gap runs, most in the NFL, 25% play action, third most. You mentioned motion earlier, 52% motion, which is the third most. And I love the way the Ravens use motion for leverage and also to ID coverage. It's not just window dressing. It's not just the Matt Canada offense. Like, let's just throw a bunch of motion out there and see what happens. It's motion with a purpose. There is a specific reason they are doing it. Also, again, some more numbers thrown at everybody. 80% shotgun, fourth most in the league. And then you look at the type of offense they are in terms of personnel grouping offense. Very heavy base. Their top personnel groupings, 30% in 21 personnel, which is the second most in the league, 27% 22 personnel, which is the most in the league for 22, 24% 12 personnel, which is 10th. And then their fourth used personnel grouping is 11 personnel, which they use 10% of the time, and that's last in the entire NFL. So basically 90% of their personnel groupings almost is wrapped up with either two running backs or two tight ends on the field, which also makes sense given how much of a weapon and how much I am in love with Patrick Ricard and what they use him for. His power, his pace, his almost like he can play some defensive tackle as well, but as a fullback, like you can literally watch him convert speed to power on blocks, let alone his footwork. And there was a block. That
was the best I've ever heard. I never made that connection. That was incredible, and that was incredible. Converting speed to power as a fullback is the best way to put it.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I truly came away impressed with him. I've always liked his game, but watching this New England game, I was very impressed. The one that really got me, it's early on. All 22 angle is you're staring at the Ravens offense. Patriots defense is far away from you. Ricard pulls from the left. Judon spikes inside. He comes in. Ricard meets him, smashes him, and then turns him and seals him so the run can still get to the perimeter. He's out leveraged. Judon has leverage. Man. Yeah, just cleans it up beautifully. It was, and it's not just technique and it's not just power. It's both. He smashes into Judon, gets his hooks into him, and then turns him. It was beautiful. And from then on, I'm watching for so many things. I'm watching what kind of coverage the Patriots are using. What's Rashad Bateman doing? What's Lamar Jackson's progression? And I kept finding myself, no matter what, leaving all of that and just watching whatever Patrick Ricard was doing. They use him as a weapon, much like in a different way what the 49ers do with Kyle Juszczyk. But Ricard's dials are just turned up to the physical aspect of the game. But he can leak out and run some routes a little bit. He's mobile for that size and that pace. I love what they do on offense because of how unique they are. And you see Lamar Jackson's play action numbers. And granted, you don't have to be a good running team to make play action work, but it helps. And especially versus a defense like the Buffalo Bills, where their second level defenders are taught to play the run first. So if you're going play action or any type of run action, RPO, read option, whatever have you, anything that involves the quarterback hiking it and making some kind of run action, those second level defenders are taught to honor that. They're not going to do what the Colts like to do, well, last year at least anyway, where they're still sitting in the grass no matter what. They're taking those steps forward. So if you're successful with the run, they're going to take more steps forward. And if the run game is flowing, how much more of a reaction do you get from those second level defenders? How much more do Edmonds and Milano and Taron Johnson or any of the safeties, how much more do they bite and open up bigger space for Lamar Jackson in that middle of the field, where 40.9% of Lamar's passes have come in the middle of the field this year, 21.6 in the short, so 0 to 9 yards, 10.2% in the intermediate, 10 to 19, 9.1 in the deep area. It's Beauty and the Beast style. Tale as old as time, song as old as rhyme. Linebackers bite on play action. You throw into that vacated space where they used to be. And then you have a tight end weapon who's a unicorn as well, like Mark Andrews. He will live in that middle of the field if you let him. And Lamar loves Mark Andrews. You mentioned it on that cover zero adjustment in the game against New England, highlighted by him just seeing his boy down there in the end zone and being like, yeah, I'm going to throw it up to this guy. And Andrews makes a play and catches another touchdown later on a little Chiefs, Travis Kelce shovel pass type of action in the red zone. They can kill you with the play action game and what Lamar can do. They can also kill you with their run game, with how unique it is and how physical it is. And everything for Baltimore, for me, and I think rightfully so, stems from that running game. And I'm not even talking about Lamar. I'm talking about the running backs and the play action that feeds off of it. And then you add Lamar into it. Okay, we're going to run some QB power. We're going to run some QB bash. and we're throwing counter looks.
Makes
and
you jumpy. If you're a kind of perimeter second level defender, first level defender, you are going to start to come up and bite. If they get you with the bash, if they get you with the veer a couple times, you are going to honor it or you will die.
Yeah. And Lamar's hit several big runs this year already. The big 79-yarder against Miami. He had 2 explosive runs against New England, one that got him down to the red zone, another one later in the drive that gave him 38 points. He can gash you in big ways. As Dobbins starts to get healthier, he has the ability to gash you. Justin Hill had a big run as well. They've got explosivity in the backfield from Lamar through the running backs. And then you add it in with that play action game. And if that really starts to get cooking, especially for a Bills defense that we don't know what their secondary is going to look like. Is Jordan Poyer going to play? Is Dane Jackson going to play? You want those numbers in coverage to continue to help out these younger guys. Any more numbers that you have to commit forward, the pendulum swings even further towards the Baltimore Ravens. And if the Bills can't control that run game and also by extension the play action game, I don't want to say dead in the water, but it's going to be very tough for them to defend the Baltimore Ravens offense.
Most certainly will. And you make a lot of good points. Like I said, I used to work at Sports Info Solutions, and I would highly recommend they do a 7-day free trial for their data set for anyone listening.
Oh, and we're all about my gap percentage runs are from Sports Info Solutions. I love SIS.
Exactly. And they do a really fun advanced metric called points earned. And it goes into EPA, but it considers all 22 players on the field. And in the most 10,000 recent circumstances of the positioning of all 22 players, alignment, and where they end up, what was the concepts at hand? Was it a cover 3? Was it a sail concept? What was it? They go beyond that. So points earned, Lamar Jackson's number two to Marcus Mariota right now. Total points earned per play. He is 4th in play action. Points above average, another one they do. 10.82, that is 3rd. EPA, he is 1st, 12.485. Positive EPA has been generated on 60% of his 33 attempts in play action. WAR, wins above replacement, for my baseball folks, they have one. 0.4 wins just in play action. That's 2nd. And he's been sharp, man. So the element that has been added that they have never done, Lamar Jackson dating back to I found this through Sports Info Solutions because you can go to the college side all the way back to 2016. Lamar Jackson, since 2016, his Heisman campaign season at Louisville, has thrown a total of 70 passes from under center, 17 of which is the great thing about SIS, is you can click the attempts and see every single one, 17 of which were at the 1-yard line. Now you go look and you go toggle through and you see play action, yes, and you do personnel filters and you say shotgun, no, and you go back through. Well, lo and behold, who is earning the 8th most points on their 10 attempts? So a 7th of what he has done in the previous, since 2016, however many years, 6 years, what is that? 7 years?
Yeah, 6, 7.
He's completed 10 of those 10 attempts and is sharp as a tack. He has generated an EPA of 5.18. They've added 5.18 points on only 10 attempts from under center. They are running boots. They are running waggle. They are running outside zone. They are running all kinds of stuff from under center, and that is a really fun element that makes this offense complete. In my opinion, think the best offense is every offense, and I really like the Packers offense because they run zone, they run gap, they run under center in big format, big personnel. They can spread it out. They can go tempo. They can slow it down. So I really like, and a lot of that, because Aaron Rodgers is a deep veteran of a lot of control, is a little bit mobile, so he can do a little bit of things. So when you're starting to get into a complete offense that Lamar Jackson is comfortable in, running 5-step and 7-step dropbacks from under center, that is just another way to answer questions or pass tests that a defense gives you. So when you can talk about putting Ricard in the backfield with J.K. Dobbins, posing the threat of that sort of gap integrity with a fullback added into the equation, and then you can boot Lamar Jackson, have a couple plays off for Lamar. We talk about Josh Allen having a really heavy workload. Lamar Jackson, because he is always in shotgun or pistol the last few years, every play ends up being a mental decision for Lamar Jackson. I have to read this defender and make the right read. If I'm throwing the ball, I have to make a read. Now you can boot him a little bit. You're comfortable. His footwork is very nice right now in it. You're letting him rest his mind a little bit. and then come prepare for those high leverage downs where he does need to step up. You're making it easy on him the way that Andy Reid has done for Patrick Mahomes, the way that Dayball has done for Josh Allen. Make it easy on him here and there. And that way the mental grind isn't going to wear him down and make him feel as much pressure. So I think that's a great point that you make. And play action pass game for the Ravens has been sharp as heck this year, and is definitely going to be Milano. What do we have? Poyer's playing and Hyde isn't, correct?
Hyde is out for the year. Poyer practiced in a limited fashion today. It's still very much undecided if he plays this weekend.
Definitely. And then Johnson, the nickel, correct?
Yes.
Teron Johnson?
Yeah, Taron
Johnson, pardon me. He has been outstanding throughout his career. Love him. One of my favorite slot defenders in the NFL. So those guys, all of a sudden, like you said, if the run game starts to get going, you have to hold integrity in the play action game.
It's going to be huge. And I love the mental piece that you mentioned with Lamar, because myself and Eric Turner in the Cover One film room last night, we focused purely on the Bills offense against the Miami Dolphins and what the Dolphins defense did to make Josh Allen work, not only physically, but mentally. They were constantly, what they did, they were changing the pre to post snap picture with all their different pressure looks and the coverages they were playing behind it, whether it was, mugging the A gap and bluffing pressure, bringing simulateds or creepers, constantly showing 6 at the line. And okay, then we're going to bring 6. Now we're going to bring 4, but which 4 and where are they coming from? And when are they coming? Constantly making Josh have to work. And I remember learning this back during, two-a-days, because we would spend a portion of it in the classroom doing, whiteboard work. And I remember our coaches always telling us that mental exhaustion is more, it affects your body more than physical.
It's more frustrating.
Yes.
Physical exhaustion is tiring. Mental exhaustion makes you frustrated and emotional and starting to really, grind your gears, make mistakes, start to press, push, do those kinds of things.
Yes. And so I love that you mentioned that piece of kind of giving Lamar a mental break, because the Bills couldn't do that for Josh Allen against Miami. And it also ties into, I think the Bills should be a pass first offense, but they need the running game to be able to take some off the plate of Josh Allen physically, but also mentally. It's very important to let that quarterback just for a play or two.
Live to die on another down. What are we going to run on third down? What do I like? What can I communicate? All those kinds of things.
Instead of just constantly being like, what? Like, I guess you're just frantic. You're flustered.
Right now, who is there a rat dropping down? What's my pre? What's my post? Who's hot? All of those kinds of things.
So much. Excellent
Exactly.
point. We're vibing.
Quarterback's not fun to play, man.
No, it's rough, man. There's so much goes into it. Even just the when we had Isaiah Hodgins on and Isaiah McKenzie from the Bills this offseason. And a lot of what we were going into is just like how much goes into just a simple 6-yard hitch and a completion. Like people just think
what leverage are they playing? What are they showing pre-snap? Where's who's inside of me? Who's outside of me?
Where's the space? Alignment? When do I sit? Where do I go? What angle is the quarterback seeing the same thing I'm seeing?
All NFL routes are if then, and there's 3 ifs and 3 thens.
It's like 3 factorial. So there's so many possibilities. Oh yeah, well said. I'm very excited to see what your number 1 is, because we have reached the main event of the main event. Give me. I'm going to
go cheese ball. I'm going to go ESPN. I'm going to go, Fox Sports. I'm going to do it all. And I'm going to say the main event, man. What are people going to tune into this game for? To watch Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen add another game into, an AFC. It's not, I wouldn't say it's a rivalry at this point in time. I think these two fan bases and franchises, from my 30,000 foot view, think each other are pretty blue collar, think each other are pretty cool. Bills
and they both hate the Chiefs, so I think it's
they both really hate the Chiefs. They kind of both really hate the Patriots.
Yes,
the Steelers are not, a
Bills fans do not like the Steelers. I know the Ravens don't. Yeah, we're kind of very similar. Yeah, we can be one.
I think Ravens fans really like Bills fans and Eagles fans. They're all in the same kind of world. Ravens fans don't really have a reputation the way those two other fan bases do for positive in one city and maybe negative in another. But why are you tuning into this game if you're not someone who's listening to this podcast or my podcast? It's because you want to watch Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson go at it. Scott Hansen is going to have this game on nonstop. This game is constantly going to be on Red Zone. This is going to be the prime matchup, especially of that 1:00 window. And I think it's really exciting. 2 quarterbacks that are in a really similar amount of what is being asked of them. And how much does their offense need them to facilitate things? And how we talked about the mental and the physical aspect. How much workload are they carrying? I mean, this is one of them's like a Raptor F-150, and the other one's like a Hummer. These guys are just insane with the amount of payload that they have to carry for their offense. So It's going to be an exciting matchup. It has this weather element, which requires even more precision. It decreases the margin for error. It makes a big play bigger if you are playing in some sort of a tropical depression, whatever the deal is. The Ravens played the 49ers in the rainiest game I've ever seen in my life. Everyone would call it a monsoon in 2019, and Lamar was just able to sneak one kind of jumpish ball between two defenders for Mark Andrews. That ends up being the deciding factor. The Ravens run a 12-play, I think 33-yard drive to run the clock out at the end of the game, and beat the 49ers, who ended up winning the NFC that year. Yeah. And it's just those big moments, who's going to step up to it. And these two aren't playing each other. You know, you always say, hey, the offenses don't play each other, all of those kinds of things. But I'm just really excited overall. The fan in me is very excited. Who's going to get the 15 minutes of fame following this game? You know, one of them could very easily account for 500 yards and 3 touchdowns and still lose the game. Yeah. So it's just very exciting. I think that's why everyone's tuning in. That's why everyone's excited. In 2019, the Ravens go to Buffalo and play in a really physical, kind of weird game. Lamar ends up getting hit in the pocket and bent like a folding table, as Bills fans are ever so familiar with. Shout out to the Mafia. And ends up kind of have a lingering injury because of that, but also threw a 62-yard touchdown on that pass. Then a more important matchup in the playoffs the following season, and Teron Johnson ends up having a 100-yard pick six. They knock Lamar out of the game. You know, crazy stuff going on in this win game. And I'm excited for Chapter 3, man. These guys are probably going to play each other. Lamar not under contract yet with the Ravens. Hopefully that is the case, and many Ravens fans hope that is the case. But if it ultimately is the case, hopefully this is Chapter 3 out of 15, 18, 20. These guys playing long, healthy, wealthy careers in the NFL, and these exciting matchups that get people to tune in and spread the good word of my Lord and Savior, the sport of football.
Well played, well said. I think, it's so exciting to have two of the premier, not just quarterbacks, but premier players in the NFL, with where Josh Allen is and where Lamar Jackson is. And there are so many parallels that can be drawn between both teams in terms of how much the offenses run through them and how much is placed on their plate. And I agree with everything you said. And I'm not just saying that, I genuinely agree. And it also relates into my number one, which I skewed more towards the Lamar side of things. I'm focusing kind of large scale here, but purely the Buffalo Bills defense versus Lamar Jackson because of what he is. He is, with what he's done as a passer now, you've talked about it already, the mechanical progression and where he's grown as a thrower of the football, both mechanically and mentally as well. He's always been a dual threat guy, but I think he's even more of that now. He's still, despite the fact that he's put on more weight and he's eating popcorn at press conferences and stuff, he still has that dynamic ability. He's got the burst, he's got the long speed, he's got the short area quickness, he's got the agility, he's got the elusiveness that could, the proverbial make a man miss in the phone booth type of agility there. But he's got the arm, he's got a cannon. He's still got some issues with ball placement from time to time and getting through some progressions. He'll get lazy with his footwork and off platform from time to time, but he's really progressed as a thrower of the football. And with what we expect to see from the Bills defense from a health standpoint, going into this game, Dane Jackson may play, but there's a very realistic scenario where Kyer Elam is your corner one, and your corner two is either Jamarcus Ingram from UB or newly signed Xavier Rhodes. And then your safety grouping, does Jordan Poyer play, or are you rolling out DeMar Hamlin and Jaquan Johnson, who combined have 3 starts in the NFL at this point, including the start for each of them last week against the Miami Dolphins? So what you're able to do in coverage, pass rush, the front, the back end,
fitting the run from your safeties.
Yes. So, which is such a hard piece, fitting the run from depth. Everything you do on the back end is tied to what you do on the front end. The Buffalo Bills love to use light boxes. That is their forte. It has been under Leslie Frazier and Sean McDermott for the most of their stead here. They come into the year using light boxes on 49% of defensive snaps. That's the 7th most in the league. They want to keep numbers in coverage. They only want to rush forward. They want to fit the run with those light boxes. If they can't, they have to start bring more numbers forward, right? If Lamar is the threat as the runner, whether it's Lamar in scrambling, whether it's Lamar on design runs or J.K. Dobbins, whoever on design runs, if you have to bring more numbers forward, that leaves you less numbers in coverage. Simple math, nothing revelatory, nothing crazy. But then you've got those fewer numbers in coverage, but this time it's not Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer and Tre'Davious White. This time it easily could be DeMar Hamlin and Jaquan Johnson and Kyer Elam and Xavier Rhodes or Jamarcus Ingram going up against Rashad Bateman, who I think is a legitimate high end right now, like where he is.
It's hard not to see a little Stephon Diggs in the way Rashad Bateman moves.
His release package is beautiful. His physicality, he's got run after catch ability. He can high point the football. He can make contested catches. He's big. He's physical. He's fast. He is shaping up into be a wide receiver 1 type player, which is fine, but even better because your wide receiver 1 or your option 1 is Mark Andrews, who's a unicorn at tight end. If Lamar starts to get things working one way or the other, again, you have to allocate resources somehow, some way. So if Lamar's functioning as a passer, cool. You have to play those numbers in coverage, which means there's less numbers up front to stop what the Ravens really want to do, which is pound the rock and use their gap scheme. And it's so much worse against gap scheme runs with light boxes and the type of defenses we're seeing, because a lot of the defenses now are built to stop zone runs. You're trying to just gum up the works a little bit, slow things down, and allow your second and third level defenders to come up and make plays. But the
trying
Ravens,
to use the sideline, spread things out,
yes,
keep it lateral.
Exactly. Make them go horizontal, rally and tackle. That doesn't happen with gap runs because they're getting runs right at you. You're getting downhill. The offense is getting upfield in a hurry. And that works even better against light boxes. If you're sitting there playing with 6 in the box, you've already got 5 offensive linemen, that's 6 potential gaps. You add, whether it's Ricard as the fullback or Andrews as the tight end, or you're running 21 or 22 or all these scenarios, it's very easy to get out-gapped against the Baltimore Ravens, even when you're going with 7 or 8 man boxes, let alone if you're going with light boxes. So what do the Bills have to play from their box numbers? How does it relate to coverage? It all ties into Lamar. How many resources do they have to allocate towards stopping his arm or his legs? This offense for Baltimore goes as Lamar Jackson goes, nothing crazy. How do you stop him? How do you function into that? How much man coverage can you play on the back end? Are you willing to risk your second and third level defenders having their backs turned or being deep down the field and risking Lamar Jackson breaking contain against your rushers, and all of a sudden he's broken, he's out of the pocket, and he's got 10, 15 yards of space, and arguably the most dangerous man with the ball in his hands is in the wide open field against your defense? How do they balance and layer their coverages, layer their schemes against the Ravens run game, the play action game, and against Lamar in general? Because again, there's only so many resources you can allocate. And given how the Bills are kind of a walking wounded group on the interior of their defensive line and on the back end in the secondary, I think it's easy for them to kind of get outgamed or out chess matched given the matchup they have against the Baltimore Ravens, especially if there's weather involved, and then that skews things even further.
Very well said. And my expectation for what we're going to see from the Bills defensively, and I think the recipe for them to go win in Baltimore, is putting yourself in the position to simply execute. And to me, that means you are going to run your 4-man rushes that you are going to continue running. You are going to stick someone on the roof. You are going to load the box. You are going to dedicate bodies to stopping the run. Mm-hmm. And you are going to dare Lamar Jackson, hopefully in a rainy game, to throw it over your head.
Yeah.
And if you do the opposite of that and want to play split safety looks and have light boxes, if you're trotting out inexperienced safeties and inexperienced cornerbacks, you're setting yourself up for failure. Keep it simple, stud, kiss approach. You want Kyer Elam playing on that vertical plane, cover 3, stick one of those safeties on the roof, have the other corner, Matt Milano, Trey Edmonds, big, long, mobile guys that can carry their hook to curl up the seam, can do some damage. So I'd anticipate that to be the Bills' general philosophy. Keep it simple, stud. We're going to go in a rain game. We're going to play a lot of cover 3 looks, a lot of middle of the field close looks, try and funnel the ball to the outside, to the seams a little bit, and ask the Ravens to, hey, we want you to get, then what is the counter to that? You want the Ravens to really spread the football field out formation-wise. They're not going to want to run tight, condensed splits and formations against that kind of look. So I anticipate seeing a lot of like YY on one half and then twins on the other. So the Ravens have a power element. If they want to run the ball, they'll probably have a run play and a pass play in a lot of times. And then have a twins look on the other side. That's something I would expect to see 6, 7, 8 times in this game. Having Rashad Bateman all the way lined up towards the boundary on the numbers, outside the numbers. Have someone in the slot, Devin Duvernay, a DeMarcus Robinson, maybe interchanging a little bit. Having that power, having that speed element. And for the Bills, they just need to go execute. If they want to win this game, keep it in front of you. don't allow any of these runs to start wearing you down, because as soon as they do, that's how you die. And if I have to pick a way to make the Ravens beat me or any team beat me, it's always going to be through the air. Maybe that's not the case so much for a Bills team, but most of the time, if you want to die through the air. You don't want to die against a dangerous rushing attack that has historically defied what running the football in the modern NFL is because of who they have behind center. So I would think we see some 7-man boxes, a lot of the time, some 8-man boxes even, and trying to go and say, hey, inclement weather, throw it over our heads and we'll win that game. That is, I mentioned that 49ers game. I mentioned the approach that at the time Robert Saleh had, and I think that is the approach that worked really well, kept the Ravens pretty at bay most of the time. Ravens defense played well too. So I think that's what we see out of this Bills team. And if they can simply go execute in those kind of middle of the field closed looks, perhaps, then I think they could walk out of Baltimore, depending on what happens on the other side of the ball, a 3-1 football team.
I expect to see a similar approach from the Bills defense, running more single high and bringing more of a safety presence into the box, which at this point in the year would be a bit of a, granted it's matchup specific in what they do, but that would be a shift in what this Bills defense has been. So on the year, too high shells pre-snap, 77% of the time, fourth most in the league. Post-snap, middle of the field, open looks, so those split safety looks, 64% middle of the field.
That's been the story under McDermott.
Yeah, and that they're really rolling with that too high safety look, and that's 64% for middle of the field open coverage, those split safety looks post-snap. That's the most in the NFL. So what they've been at first, they were more balanced last year, like 43 and 44% in terms of middle of field close versus middle of field open. It started in week 1 against the Rams, but a lot of it was like, okay, with what the Rams do, you want to stay in too high pre and post because you want to be able to spin down and be able to work off that leverage of all the Rams motion and their sail concepts and everything that they try to do as an offense. But then it continued even into the Tennessee game against the team that you would think, well, you don't want to go too high against Tennessee. And they went with more heavier boxes and a bit more single high looks. But they've been this year.
Heavy in that sense.
Yeah. They've been a too high team pre and post snap at this point. But again, to your point,
and then you play the Dolphins and you're not running middle of the field close.
Stupid Dolphins. Yeah, you are not against that offense. And yeah, I think they go more single high in this game. You have to make, if Lamar's allowed,
if Poyer's in there, I think that can change things.
Yes, I think that throws a wrench into our plans at this point, but I'm not sure whether or not he plays at this point. Again, still limited in practice. We'll see. And I think that the Bills are with their injury approach, not just this year traditionally under McDermott, they're very cautious. They are
especially considering Hyde in Poyer's case as well.
So you want to make sure with the championship aspirations this team has, I could very well see them being like, listen, sit. I don't care if we lose this game. I want you to be healthy for November and December, potentially so on and so forth. But yeah, you can't let Lamar. If Lamar gets cooking with his legs and his arm, you're done. If you allow him to get cooking with his legs, you're done. If you allow this Ravens run game to get into a rhythm, you're done. And especially for a team like the Bills that has Josh Allen, that's even worse for you, which is why the Ravens have been such a potential kryptonite team for the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes, because if they're moving the ball with the run game, not only are they moving the ball and getting yards and potential points, you're keeping the opponent in Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen off that field. The last thing you want to see if you're the Bills is the Ravens' death by 1,000 cuts running game, just constantly churning out 4 to 7 yards a clip. And then the explosives that come with like the 10+ yard runs, constantly churning yards out, constantly keeping the ball away from Josh Allen. That's a recipe for failure. And then you get pulled into the play action game then you're losing on both sides of the sword. It's very
well said. And what Leslie Frazier did, I guess, to summarize it all in that last 2020 matchup, and there was inclement weather, was he had Poyer and Hyde in split safety looks, but they were 8 yards off the ball.
Yep, they weren't
7 yards off the ball. They were split, but they were still able to go fit pretty quickly. Now they have someone in Rashad Bateman that can win in isolated situations where they did not have that previously. That's why they drafted Rashad Bateman. So if that is the approach, if Frazier, who I have never really known to not think of a new wrinkle and is one of the brightest defensive minds in the NFL, if he does decide to take a similar approach as he did in 2020, I think this game comes down to, hey, can Rashad Bateman go beat a Kyer Elam or Xavier Rhodes on the outside, go convert some big plays, go have one long run after the catch like he did against the Jets in week 1, like he did in the Patriots in week 3, and flip the field or go score a long touchdown. I think that's a very interesting aspect to this entire chess match. So I guess we'll ultimately see how it unfolds, my friend.
I also love that piece. Just one more thing to touch on before we get you out of here. One of my other big takeaways from watching Ravens versus Patriots, and you won't get it from the box score, you got to watch the game film. Rashad Bateman was open a lot. He was just getting clean releases. There's so many clips, and it's not just like it's bad Lamar. Like he's hitting Duvernay, or he's hitting Demarcus Robinson, or he's hitting Andrews.
Like one of them, there's one where Mark Andrews is in the slot, pressed up, one-on-one. You can tell that it's man coverage, and he runs Y cross, and he's wide open, and it's like a 25-yard play. But Rashad Bateman has done a split release and swiped the hands away and then accelerated and has 2-3 yards on a corner on the other side.
Ravens are going from right to left on your screen on that one. It's such a clean release package. It's beautiful. There's several reps like that where you see the completion in the middle of the field, and if you look towards the bottom or top of the screen, Bateman is 4 yards past his corner with his hand up in the air looking for it. If you look at the box score, you're seeing like Bateman's not doing anything. You watch the tape, he's winning a lot in a variety of ways. And then you saw, maybe some frustration, but in a good way. He makes that catch towards the end in the fourth quarter on the stop route, breaks a tackle, gets upfield, and you just see the emotion and the energy. And I just felt like he was like, I could have been doing this all game. Like, I've been open so much. He is a monster, and I love that point. I like a lot of people or a lot of fans look to be like, well, the Bills can just do what they did against the Ravens in the playoffs 2 years ago. They didn't have a threat on the outside like they do now with Rashad Bateman, combined with Lamar being a better passer than he was at that point. Different offense, same identity from where they're trying to be and where they're trying to go, but you have those added layers. It becomes much more complicated to defend with how Lamar has grown, and then having a legitimate wide receiver option on the outside who the numbers might not show it, but he can beat you in a hurry in a variety of ways with his skill set. And yeah, shaping up to be a really fun, really exciting game. Spencer, I know we went a little longer than the 40 minutes to an hour that I told you, but you were a champ. You were awesome. I appreciate you hopping on with me kind of last minute here as we scrambled. I also, knock on wood, for those who don't know, I was having internet connection issues before we went live. I was afraid my Wi-Fi was going to drop. I told Spencer pre-episode, I was like, if it drops, just stall, talk to the chat, dance, do whatever. You were a consummate professional. You were anything and everything that I hoped you would be coming into it, and just the way you see the game, again, that's the reason I follow you on Twitter, the way you see the game and break it down and approach it, your objective analysis and the lens at which you see football, I genuinely appreciate it. So it was an absolute pleasure and blast to have you on the show, and I really appreciate you coming on, man.
I love it, man. Cover One has been my favorite. I've been following you for quite some time, been following, Aaron for quite some time, all these guys, and it's just a lot of fun to like I said, to just get into the nitty gritty, deep aspects of it. Talk about the real stuff, not the cookie cutter stuff. I appreciate you guys so much. It's been a fantastic joy. Every time the Ravens and the Bills play, I get excited because I'm like, I get to go consume a ton of Cover One content. You guys kill it, man. Super pumped up for this. Super pumped up for this game. Any Bills Mafia traveling to the game, please feel free to hit me up on Twitter. If you want to know where to go, where to stay, what to do, what's going on, please feel free to DM me at Ravens for Dummies. I always try to be as cordial, or I can't think of the right word.
Gracious?
The concierge. I try to be the concierge of the away fan as much as I can, so that, if you're looking, hey, what's the fun parts of Baltimore? Where should I tailgate? All that stuff. Feel free to DM me at any time. I'll give you a couple places to go, what you should do game day, all that good kind of stuff. It's been a joy. Thank you so much, Ann, for having me. Go have a blessed day. Hope it's a great game. Can't say I hope the Bills win, but hope they have a lot of fun, and hope we get a classic Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson performance.
Yeah, it should be. As of right now, even with the weather, it's shaping up to be a good one. And I appreciate all the kind words for myself and the brand. And again, you taking the time to sit down with me and just crushing it. It's fun to get into the weeds and just talk ball and X's and O's and anything and everything that comes with scheme and structure and the hows and whys of everything. So I appreciate the hell out of you, man. Enjoy your week. Enjoy your night. Go Bills, unfortunately, but I wish the Ravens the best of luck. I can't tip mine. I will tip mine. Appreciate you. A tip of the cap to you. Enjoy your night. Enjoy the week. Appreciate the hell out of you, and I'll see you on the old Twitter sphere.
Sounds good, my friend. Enjoy, everyone. Have a great week. And
well played. Spencer was absolutely tremendous. Again, and really helped me out in the pinch. I had Cole Jackson coming on, who is another Ravens analyst who I love and have more of a rapport with. So I was going to bring him on. He had to bail, unfortunately, at the last minute because of some life stuff. And I reached out to Spence. He came on, crushed it. I genuinely go and give him a follow. Not just because, of Ravens content, but he does a lot of good draft content as well. He's really good. Obviously, you guys can tell and girls can tell, of diagnosing and diagramming and detailing the game of football, the hows and whys, X's and O's, talking ball. Great with draft content, film analysis. And again, just selfishly, if you're a Bills fan, you always want to stay up on all the other teams in the NFL because all the other teams are your enemy. So stay up on the Baltimore Ravens by following Spence at Ravens for Dummies and just check out his content as a whole. He's absolutely phenomenal. I appreciate you, Heather. Heather saying, thanks, Ann, for, amongst all the things, pronouncing Taron Johnson's name correctly. Go Bills. It comes from several years ago. I didn't know if it was Taron or Teron. And then I watched multiple interviews with him and saw him introduced as Taron over and over. And so I just thought, well, if he's doing these official interviews, I'm assuming they know how to pronounce his name. So yeah, I went with the Taron. But you still get a lot of Terons, even amongst Bills fans, Bills content creators in a variety of ways. You still get a lot of Terons. You know what else I get a lot of? Sponsor of the show, One Pie Pizza, the best pizza in Buffalo, New York. I mentioned it at different points in the show. I like to change it up every now and again. Go into the episode description, whether here on YouTube or on any one of the podcasting apps or platforms, and you'll find the online menu to One Pie Pizza. Fantastic sweet sauce pie, cup of char pepperoni, great cheese to sauce ratio, homemade blue cheese. They are phenomenal in every way, shape, and form when it comes to anything and everything pizza. They're also good people. They do a lot of initiatives and drives for the community and the city of Buffalo. So if you live in Buffalo, I don't care, North Towns, South Towns, whatever have you, get yourself some One Pie Pizza. You will not regret it. Hands down, the best pizza in Buffalo, New York. I eat a lot of pizza. I love it. It is the best. Official stamp of approval. That's why I partnered with them. Again, online menu can be found in the episode show notes. Go and get yourself some One Pie Pizza. And now we're going to get ourselves some Buffalo Bills stock up and Buffalo Bills stock down. Coming out of this Miami Dolphins game, for those of you still rocking live, which there are a good handful of you, I'll start to throw it up in the chat. Who or what? So position groupings, players, coaches, whatever have you. Who is trending up? Who is trending down? I love the engagement and the chat option here on these live streams. So whatever you got, throw it up into the chat. We'll discuss it and break it down like we do every week. As you start to get those juices flowing, I'm going to lead off with my first. I'm going to start reverse. I'm going to go stock down. I mentioned it as one of my points coming into this game. One of the matchups, the Buffalo Bills, run game against the Baltimore Ravens defense, what they're able to do for Josh Allen. And that ties into my first stock down. And again, I want to lead with the down because this is one of my bigger takeaways, albeit in a negative fashion, coming out of that Miami Dolphins game, is the offensive line play. And yes, there was injuries going into it. Mitch Morse, I hope everybody realizes now how important of a player that he is, not just from an execution standpoint, but from a mental standpoint, what he does in helping to set protections and calls and his headiness and his awareness, let alone his athleticism and how good he is in space. He does a lot for this Bills offense, but they come into that game without Mitch Morse. Then Spencer Brown has to leave because of heat illness, but even before that, he wasn't playing great. Quessenberry comes in. Tommy Doyle has to get put in at right guard. He goes down. Van Roten goes down. Manx is in at center. There's the whole entire, from the center to the right tackle, brand new group against Miami. But even before that, we've seen inconsistent offensive line play. And I mentioned some of it earlier in this episode. A lot of it is chemistry related and just some fine tuning of the details that it's unfortunate that we're seeing it. I do think they will get course corrected as the season goes through. I have faith in Aaron Cromer and I have faith in several of these players as well, but this group just needs more time to gel and they need more reps. Unfortunately, coming out of where we are now, against Miami, the stock is still very much down. Josh Allen was pressured. Again, stock down for this group in terms of run performance and pass protection. Josh Allen was pressured against Miami on 43.8% of his dropbacks. That was the third highest in week 3. It's even more from a volume standpoint if you're thinking about it, because again, he dropped back 73 times. And he's pressured on 43% of that. That is absolutely wild. He was consistently not running for his life, but constantly having to navigate and maneuver in the pocket, whether stepping up, evading rushers, escaping, trying to break contain, keeping his eyes downfield. So much was asked of him. And a lot of it, you got to tip your cap to Miami and what they did. Their simulated pressures, their blitz packages, showing 6 at the line and bringing 6, showing 6 again, but then bringing 4, showing 6 again and then bringing 4, but a different 4. who they were dropping, when they were dropping, where they were bringing blitzes from, slot blitzes, far corner blitzes, spinning safeties down and going into cover 2 looks, spinning safeties down and going cover 3, having Javon Holland lined up on the edge in a 6-man front and screaming back as the single high post safety in cover 3, when earlier in the game he had a similar look and blitzed off the edge and had a sack fumble on Josh Allen. Miami really cranked up the right dials and at the right times and taxed Josh Allen mentally and physically. And they had a really good game plan going into this game. Granted, I think a lot of that's not a lot, but some of the success of Miami's game plan was related or at least correlated in some way to the health of the Bills offensive line and their periphery weapons as a whole. But no matter how you slice it, the Bills offensive line is a bit down right now. I think the pass protection is better than the run blocking, but there's issues with this run blocking, whether it's consistency in approach, whether it's chemistry, whether it's hand placement or execution. I do think the Buffalo Bills need to get back to their gap scheme approach like they did towards the back end of 2021. On the year so far, the Bills have run zone runs on 67% of their runs, and they've run gap on 31%. So they are right now predominantly a zone running team. I don't think that's working for them right now. Again, because like what I alluded to earlier, and with what Spencer said as well, when in zone runs, the core foundation of all of it is double teams, whether it's outside zone, inside zone, wide zone, whatever have you. Double teams are the core at the foundation of your zone runs. And executing those double teams, 2 offensive linemen not necessarily reach, but double team let's say defensive tackle in this instance. One of them will then peel off, get to the second level and pick up a linebacker or a safety. You're seeing misexecution in who is peeling off and who is climbing to the second level and when. And I think a lot of that, again, is because of chemistry. You need to be able to work constantly. If you're the guard, you need to be able to constantly work with your center and your tackle in order to feel those things out. So okay, we both hit this guy, I'm going to pull off. We both hit this guy, okay, he's going to pull off. It's not, because it's not handwritten in stone where it's like, okay, on this play, you're both going to double team the 3 tech. You at right tackle, you're going to, stay on that 3 tech for 3 seconds, and then you're going to climb to this linebacker. It's a feel thing. You have to read the flow. Where's the defensive line lined up? What shade? What gap? What does the second level look like? It's not a gimme. There is very much a choose your own adventure and having to be like water and being very fluid in a zone scheme. The idea is simple, but the execution is not. Nothing in football is simple when it comes to execution, but that piece requires chemistry and a lot of reps and practice time together. The Bills offensive line has not had that to this point. I do think that will get better, but for the sake of what this team is right now, I think you need to see more gap scheme, more pin and pulls, more power, more counter, especially with how they're using 21 personnel. Again, that means 2 running backs. So Reggie Gilliam and Devin Singletary, Gilliam and Cook and Singletary, 2 running backs. It could be a fullback and a running back, whatever have you, but you got 2 backs in the backfield. Majority of the 21 personnel is involving Reggie Gilliam, but they've used 21 personnel 23% of the time. That's the 5th most in the NFL. Last year in 2021, they used 21 personnel 10% of the time. So we're seeing an uptick in that personnel grouping, but a lot of it has been in different ways. In week 1, we saw a lot of Gilliam, and it was with the surge motion on those outside zone runs. In week 3 against Miami, it was more from a passing perspective because Gilliam had to be on the field because Diggs was dropping down and needed 2 IVs. Gabriel Davis wasn't 100%. McKenzie goes down. Kumaro goes down. There's so much that is happening. Gilliam played and saw a lot of snaps, but it was more from a receiving aspect and receiving role. What we saw down the stretch in 2021, again, was some Gilliam, and we saw physical runs. We saw power. We saw counter. We saw pin and pulls. We saw QB power. We saw QB bash. We saw gap scheme runs, and it really helped this Bills running game. I think they need to get back to that and simplify things. Yes, it takes a little more physicality in order to run these gap runs. You need to be able to people move, and you need to be able to execute. It's also a little more challenging from an execution standpoint because in a gap run, the run is designed to go to a specific gap. Like this run is supposed to go between the guard and the tackle. Whereas zone run, it's more similar to the zone blocking for the running back. It's a little more choose your own adventure. Be fluid, be like water. Wherever you see an opening, go, get vertical, get north and south, get it. Gap scheme runs are more specific. They do require specific execution, more people moving, because you are designed to go to a specific gap in the line to run the football there. So it's not just guaranteed that you'll be successful with it. But we saw it work for this Bills group last year. And I think from a quick hitting perspective, you're getting these defensive lines that are getting push and penetration against the Buffalo Bills offensive line. They're getting upfield in a hurry, getting some sort of quick hitting gap scheme run to just get 3 or 4 yards, just get positive yardage. Instead, what we're seeing now is the push and penetration. Bills running backs are getting hit in the backfield. Again, like I mentioned, 51% of the Bills runs right now by running backs, they're getting hit at the line of scrimmage. That's third most in the NFL at that 51%. They're just not getting it done on the ground. And some of that can be put on the running backs. I don't think Singletary or Moss or Cook has the highest ceiling, but I don't think any of those backs are world beaters that can consistently play above the scheme and consistently make your offensive line right, even when they're wrong. So that definitely plays into it, but there's a lot of issues with this offensive line from a run blocking perspective. And the stock is down for this group as a whole coming out of Miami, not just for the run blocking, but for the pass protection as well. And the run game is down as a whole, both with the running backs and the offensive line. Again, 51% of runs, being hit at the line of scrimmage is really, really bad, especially for a team that is 27th in running back rushes with 49, 31st in running back rushes EPA by attempt at negative 0.22. And then Bills running backs are 22nd in broken tackle plus missed tackle percentage per attempt at 10.2%. So the O-line isn't getting it done for the running backs. The running backs aren't making enough positive plays to bail out the O-line. It's a bit of a mess when it comes to that run game situation. So both of those stocks are down for me. And I think they're the biggest and the ones that require the most focus. There's a couple other, little individual player pieces on the team that are down, but I don't want anything to take away from the run game and the offensive line right now. But again, I do want to say, take all of this with a grain of salt as well. We're 3 games in. I don't care how good something is right now or how bad something is right now. Okay. You're 3 weeks in. No team knows who they are after the 3rd week of September. Who the Buffalo Bills are, who any team in the NFL is right now, is not who they will be in November and December, hell, even in the middle of October. So who a team is right now is not who they will end up being by the end of the year. And 3 games is not enough of a sample size to make declarative statements and concrete judgments on any piece of any team, good or bad. If the Bills came out and won each of their first games 50-0, and they were sitting here at 3-0, outscoring opponents 150-0, oh, hit the camera there, I still wouldn't sit here and say, oh man, like this team is invincible. They're undefeated. It's done. They're going to win everything. They're amazing. No. And it's the same thing for bad things as well. It's only 3 games in, not enough sample size, still too many variables to make concrete judgments and decisions and declarations on who or what any team is. Oh, excuse me. I felt that cough coming for about 2 minutes. I'm surprised I was able to hold off. Let's move on to some positives. Talk about some stock up things for the Buffalo Bills. I'm going to start with Reggie Gilliam. I really enjoy Reggie Gilliam. I like the fullback game in today's NFL. I gushed earlier about how the Ravens use Patrick Ricard. I love how the 49ers use Kyle Juszczyk. It's a true chess piece to be able to run 21 personnel with a fullback who gives you options in the run game, but also gives you options out in the route distribution. You put defenses into a bind. Do they leave their nickel corner in there? Okay, if they do, can that nickel corner match and fit in the run game to go up against a heavier personnel package? Or is he purely from a coverage piece? Okay, do you go heavy and bring in a third linebacker? Are you primarily a nickel defense? So now you're bringing in that third linebacker who isn't necessarily a starter for you. How does he function in coverage? Because Reggie Gilliam can be split out or line up in the slot or come out of the backfield and run routes. He can function in the route distribution. Can that third linebacker cover? Because he might have to cover Gilliam, or based on the formational alignment and the personnel alignment, he might have to spread out and might have to cover a slot receiver. You're able to force the defense's hand a little bit and dictate to the defense when you use these heavier personnel packages that include chess pieces. Reggie Gilliam's skill set and how he's being used, I said it last week, I'm going to continue to say it. It allows the Buffalo Bills to access more of the menu without having to flip the page. That's a huge piece for any team. That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to be as varied and as multiple as humanly possible without changing anything. If you can stay in the same personnel grouping and run the ball and pass the ball in a variety of ways, that's unstoppable because there's no tendency giveaway to the defense, and they have to match what you're doing. You get to dictate to them. Reggie Gilliam's stock is up for how he performed in the pass game, and he had to. Like I mentioned, Stephon Diggs was cramping hard. He needed 2 IVs after the game that he said. Gabe Davis played 96% of snaps, but you could tell that he wasn't healthy. Injuries to the rest of the receiving core as well. Gilliam had to function in a receiving world, and he did. He had a really nice catch on the opening drive where the ball came on him before he even looked. He plucked it right out of the air. Good performance from Reggie Gilliam. Another performance that I was encouraged by out of the backfield was James Cook. And I want to see more James Cook going forward, especially given what this Bills offense is. If this Bills offense really has to lean into the pass and the spread passing attack because they can't run the ball, I want to see more James Cook. James Cook is a plus matchup out of the backfield. He started to show it a little bit in this game. I don't think his stock is to the moon right now, but I think it's trending upwards versus what we've seen. We saw him get the ball in space a little bit. We saw some of that elusiveness in space. We saw the ability to cut on a dime and make multiple defenders miss. We saw him being lined up as the boundary receiver, taking 2 little steps, slanting inside and getting a quick 9 yards. We saw him utilized out of the backfield. We saw him with a couple good pass protection reps as well. That's a huge piece. In order for him to be viable on this team in the pass, he has to be able to pass protect and not be a vulnerability. He had a solid performance. Again, nothing world changing, but very encouraging given what we've seen from him before. He's starting to trend upward little by little each week. I think he's earned himself more touches. And where this offense is going, you need a plus matchup consistently out of the backfield to make life easier for Josh Allen. Being able to dump it down to your running back at the line of scrimmage and letting him create 8 or 9 yards after the catch for you starts to take some things off the plate a little bit. And again, you're trying to lighten Josh Allen's workload, lighten what is on his plate, what is asked of him, dump it down to somebody who can create on their own. It's a huge. Oh, each week, keep coughing. I'm so sorry. James Cook, stock up. 2 big stock ups after Mr. Cook and after Reggie Gilliam. Tremaine Edmonds, Matt Milano. I think another week. I know Milano had that dropped interception that should have been a pick 6. But Milano had a couple really good solo one-on-one tackles in the hole on some runs, especially on some key third downs. Tremaine Edmonds looked good coming forward on run blitzes. He was good in coverage once again. Edmonds and Milano are really firing on all cylinders. They are functioning in the ways that deter things for the offense, which Tremaine Edmonds has done a lot, but you're also starting to see more splash plays from the best. Marcus comes in and says they're the best. They are crushing it. Big time stock up for Edmonds and Milano, and ironically, in a contract year for Tremaine Edmonds. But so much is asked of them, and so much is going to be asked from them again against the Baltimore Ravens with how they have to live in 2 worlds and fit the run and also play in coverage, especially in that intermediate part of the field. Like I mentioned, 40.9% of Lamar's passes have come in the middle, 21.6 in the short middle, 10.2 in the intermediate, 9.1 in the deep middle. And that's linebacker territory, especially with how Tremaine Edmonds will carry slot receivers and tight ends up the middle of the field in cover 2, and especially Tampa 2 looks, or even some of their other split high quarters coverages. You'll see what is asked of him. And again, a lot is asked of he and Milano. And any nickel defense, a lot is asked of your linebackers, especially for the Buffalo Bills with how they choose to play and what their responsibilities are. It's a very taxing position mentally and physically. Edmonds and Milano are really clicking at a lot of cylinders. Comment here from Mike saying Groot is really looking good. Yeah, I'm very impressed with Gregory Rousseau. He started to show flashes in training camp. He's shown it throughout the early parts of this regular season. I think the two-point rushing stance for Gregory Rousseau is really happening for him. He looks more natural and comfortable. I think it's helping him with his get off and his rush angles against offensive tackles. And in addition to the mental side of how he approaches the game and having a pass rush plan along with counters and moves, he's really starting to put it together. I'm very impressed with Gregory Rousseau. As we're starting to get more people in the chat, I mentioned earlier, please drop a like on this video if you are enjoying this content. It goes a very, very, very long way towards helping myself and this entire team to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears. So while you're still here, please, and thank you, drop a like on this video. Yeah, very impressed with Gregory Rousseau. And another stock up for me, big time. I value him a lot anyway, but I thought he had a very good performance against Miami Dolphins. Taron Johnson, who Spencer mentioned earlier. We were talking about in the chat earlier with Heather on how to say his name. He continues to play great with what is asked of him. He has to cover in man. He has to cover in zone, which isn't crazy. That's what's expected of nickel corners. But he also has to fit the run like a linebacker. There were several plays in that Miami game where their motion forced Taron Johnson into the box to the point that he was playing the role of a strong side linebacker. And he's fitting the run like a strong side linebacker. He's taking angles and taking on offensive linemen. He's taking on tight ends. He's cutting off speedy burner type running backs like Raheem Mostert and cutting off their ability to turn the corner and get outside. And he's chopping them down. He is shooting gaps on the interior, making plays behind the line of scrimmage. Taron Johnson is phenomenal. I think he's one of the best nickel corners in the entire NFL. He's right up there, depending on what you're looking for in terms of your scheme. But him, Mike Hilton, and Kenny Moore are the top three. I think you can make a case for any of them being number one. I think how everybody has played this year, Taron Johnson is, for me, I think it's arguable still, but you can easily make a case that he's the best nickel corner or slot corner in the entire NFL with what he does, with how good he is and functional he is in man and zone. Even looks where he's dropping as the deep half safety in some split high cover 2 looks where he's, again, the deep half safety, and he's dropping from around the line of scrimmage and functioning in the deep half, let alone playing his nickel role in his regular man and zone assignments, spot drop, pattern match, anything and everything against a variety of body types and skill sets, and then add in the run fit piece and how he comes forward and fits the run like a linebacker. He is a hugely important cog and piece in this Buffalo Bills defense. I don't think he gets his credit or his due. And watching the film again against Miami, just watching him fit the run like a strong side linebacker, given the fact that he's under 6 feet and he's 190 pounds, but he's playing, he's fitting the run like he thinks that he's Tremaine Edmonds or Matt Milano or AJ Klein, like he's just some big thumping linebacker. And obviously he's not, but just watching that versatility and how fearless he plays and how violent he plays and how explosive he plays, along with how technical and smooth he is, someone who is really starting to step up. And as Mark says, Taron Johnson stepped up Sunday leadership by example. Yeah, and he has to. He was the senior man in that defensive back grouping. It came out, with the starters as Elam and Benford and Jaquan Johnson and DeMar Hamlin. You needed somebody to lead by example. That guy was Taron Johnson. He continues to be a stabilizing factor in that secondary. Hopefully that continues given all those, potential injuries that we'll see how guys are coming back from, but we'll see what happens. Oh, hey, John, welcome. Thanks for joining in. John says Groot. Also on the inside over guards on 3rd and long looks good. You get Ed Oliver back, Groot, Von Miller. That equals a problem. Yes, 1,000%, as I love to say on the show. Boogie Basham has had some good reps on the interior as well at that 3-tech spot. So nice to see some of that versatility shining through for a lot of the Buffalo Bills young guns, especially on that defensive front, which the Bills have invested heavily in with draft capital these last several years. That's going to do it for us here on this episode of Disguise Coverage. I want to give a huge shout out and thank you again to Mr. Spencer Schultz on Twitter at Ravens for Dummies. He was an absolutely phenomenal guest. If you joined on the back end of this episode, go back. I'm not just saying it to plug the show. Go back to the beginning of this episode. Watch the first roughly hour and 15 minutes that Spencer was on here, just dives into anything and everything regarding the Baltimore Ravens, but things that don't necessarily just apply to the Ravens. You will learn more about football, the game, and the sport as a whole by listening to the first 3 quarters of this episode and the conversation that I had with Spencer. Just somebody who really knows ball, who can talk the game and understands it and is able to speak about it and educate fans and players in that way. Just an absolutely phenomenal guest. So huge thank you to him for joining me tonight and making that first portion of this episode absolutely tremendous. Thank you to everybody who joined me live here on this episode. I know it's a week after a loss. People tend to get a little down. They don't really want to consume Bills content. So I appreciate everybody for riding with me on this episode and not leaving me high and dry just because the Bills lost this week. So thank you very much to everybody who joined me in the live chat, the super chat earlier in this episode. Thank you very much for that. Thank you very much for all the kind words in the chat and for the kind words for Spencer as well. But overall, just your general presence is the engagement with each other, the engagement with myself, the questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, just your attention and your engagement in tuning into the show live. I really appreciate it. And I thank you very much for it. And if you are watching later, thank you very much for your post live. Oh, thank you very much, Amy. Amy says, our pleasure as always, Anthony, and Cover One. Go Bills. Thank you very much, Amy. You had several kind words for me throughout the show. I greatly appreciate it. So again, and anyone else, if you are watching later or listening on any one of the podcasting apps or platforms, thank you very much for your post live view, your post live listen or download, whatever have you. Thank you very much for any and every ounce of support. I greatly appreciate all of it, as does the entire team at Cover One. If you're listening on one of the podcasting apps or platforms, please rate and review and subscribe to Disguise Coverage. If you are watching this show on YouTube, again, drop a like. Also, please subscribe to Disguise Coverage. Both of those things are huge in terms of helping myself and this entire team to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears. Word of mouth is always great as well. Tell your family and friends and loved ones about Cover One, about Disguise Coverage. Continue to bring them to the tribe so we can continue to grow. Or, as I always say, if you thought this show was terrible or this episode was terrible, suggest it to your enemies and try and ruin their day. You know, best of both worlds in some way, shape, or form, potentially for myself and this team. But with that being said, again, massive thank you to everyone who joined me live. Massive thank you to Spencer Schultz at Ravens for Dummies on Twitter. Great conversation, talking ball with him. Big week in potential in terms of seeding for the AFC. You don't want this to be a game where if you're the Ravens, you lose to the Bills, or you're the Bills and you lose to the Ravens. And then all of a sudden you're sitting there come December and January and the seeding is impacted because you lose that head-to-head tiebreaker. I expect the Baltimore Ravens to be around for the long haul in this season, competing for a top 3 seed in the AFC. So this is, although it's early and it's just week 4, this is a pivotal game for both teams. So it was awesome to chop it up with someone great like Spencer and really dive into the nitty-gritty and the X's and O's and the hows and whys of this potential matchup and to share it with all of you folks. With that being said, oh, Carl's got some tree suggestions. He says, Ant, need to see some orange and black on your tree next time, maybe a skeleton or something. Next week will be October. The tree will be different. We will get some Halloween theme on this tree. I will tell you that. Who knows? Maybe some orange, maybe some purple, maybe some spooky stuff. We will see as we head into October. I'm very excited for what the tree has planned. I don't dress the tree. The tree dresses itself. It has a mind of its own. It's sentient. I don't want to get too much into it. This has been another episode of Disguise Coverage. I hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well, staying safe. Take care of one another. Be kind to one another. I will see you next week. Be safe. Enjoy your week. Enjoy your weekend. And as always, go Bills.